So anyway, hi
Welcome,
everybody.
everybody.
Welcome
How's
to
it
Lore You
going?
Know.
Welcome to
Great.
the Lore You Know, episode 11, Burok Torn, where we're going to talk about dwarves and Drendali, elves of Scarred Lands. Yay.
Yeah, I have fun with these guys. The dwarves are, the dwarves, but
It's funny you say that because of all the races that are in fantasy, dwarves have always been my least favorite because they are just always just dwarves. Like, I appreciate them just fine, but I'm just like, they're never all that interesting between worlds to me.
I admit they were probably my least favorite until I played in a game where we all played dwarves. Like the GM was like, "You're all dwarves," and we're like, "Oh, okay," and that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
If you're
So
that was a fun game.
I've
Like
never
and
personally
it was
done
just a
that, but I've
mishmash of
seen at conventions
different
groups
classes.
that do that, and they have so much fun
Yeah,
with it, and it's so much to play off of.
yeah.
It's such a great idea, but
Yeah, and
I
then the
just haven't
Hobbit
had the
movies
chance.
came out, and it was like suddenly cool to be a
Right.
dwarf. It's
Totally.
like, well,
Hmm.
if we can all look like Killy, then we'll all want to be dwarves, won't we? But he didn't look like a dwarf; he looked like an elf. So whatever.
It's true. He's just a very short elf.
Very short, mildly stocky elf. But yeah, anyway. So Burok Torn, today's topic, which
Yeah.
is
So
most of
what?
what I'm
I feel
against
like
from
this
this
is
book.
like one of those weird questions. What is Burok Torn? Because it isn't a creature. It isn't a person. It's actually like a
No,
place in the Scarred
place. It's
Lands.
right in the middle of the southern Kelder Mountains.
Yeah.
South of Vesh, which we talked about before, south of Morning Marshes, um, and south of Erdman's Tier, which I haven't talked about, but it's a magic lake anyway, and north of Calastia and all of that business. And it is a place of surrounded by just horrible things. But then again, not very many places on Skarn aren't surrounded by horrible
Right.
things. So to be fair,
Rhyme this
but
in.
it's the city of it's the biggest city of dwarves. It's in certainly in Gelspad and possibly on all of Skarn,
There we go.
arguably, as there's not a lot about dwarves on the other continents really, and some of the other continents I don't even think have dwarves. I don't even think they're mentioned in I don't think there's any dwarves in the Dragonlance, for example. So but yeah, dwarves are cool in that like in that whole like kind of Lord of the Rings sense, I think. But they're pretty cliche on Skarn. I mean, there's not much about them that makes them particularly, Skarnly unique, I
Yeah.
think. Just really only a couple things. That I think make them a little bit different than your standard like yo-ho mining for gold
Yo
fighting dragons
ho!
kind of dwarf.
Now it's
Yeah,
gonna
I
be
know. It's
stuck in
like
my head.
yeah, no. Well, obviously, fantasy dwarves and Snow White 7 are not the same, but but it's certainly there's that cliche. But what's interesting about the Burok Torn dwarves is their use of rune magic specifically. They get into this pretty in depth and extensively that they use kind of a unique magic about creating things and placing enchanting runes on stuff, and not just on like armor and weapons and artifice things you think about when you think about dwarves, but also on just general areas and stuff. One of the things that they have is these flags, or had before most of them getting destroyed during the war, but they had these pennants that would fly above the mountains that would protect the whole region through kind of these magical boundaries and various means and alarms and whatnot that they use to protect their area, their territory.
And it's funny you
So
mentioned
that's pretty
that.
cool.
I just have to throw this out
Yeah.
there because that was such a like neat inspiration. Like it's you have this power, right? Why wouldn't you use this kind of stuff? And so when I did an AL Adventurers League module, and there was this city in the Moonsea area that no one has ever really done anything with. And after all of the horrid events that have happened since fifth edition came out, uh, I was like, why wouldn't these wizards? Because it's a city of wizards, so they have this magic. Why wouldn't they protect their city? And
Yeah.
I took that kind of concept and I built it into the city. It is such a neat, fun thing. Like, why wouldn't these people use this magic to warn themselves about shit coming their way?
Yeah, and one of the things the dwarves actually described is they had, again, lots were destroyed during the war.
Right.
They had these arcane eyes and
Yeah.
they would have these like this room of like these pools where they would look where the arcane eyes were looking, and just like it's like having their own
Eye of Sauron.
CCTV everywhere,
Oh. Oh,
It's like their own like cameras everywhere, just like,
right.
is anyone coming up the pass? Is anyone flying down? Oh
Yeah.
dear, Cadam's coming. And they could see if anyone was en route to their territory, using these like arcane eyes, and then they had these rune flags and all this really pennants or whatever, and they had really cool stuff that they defended them. But of course, all of that was pretty much trashed in the war.
As happens when, divine beings
Yeah,
go stomping over your shit.
yeah.
So,
Well, even before the war, at one point, like one of the things that happened was Cadam actually came in and fist down smushed the mountain that the city's built in. So Burok Torn is not. It's kind of looks more like Mount Rainier now. Not Mount Rainier. Sorry, Mount one where the volcano was. Mount St. Helens. Like oops. You have a big hole in it now, where before it was like mountain, and it's got like, ooh, there's a crack taken out of it. Like Mount St. Helens. So Burok Torn, not quite looking the same. But anyway, you want to hear the history a little bit of
absolutely.
the city? Absolutely. So this is all from this book, as I already mentioned. I found Burok Torn kind of interesting. I reread this over the last day or so. They called the impregnable citadel, or at least they did. It kind of basically still is. So it's not, in terms of global scale and compared to some other places, it's not that old. It's only like 3,000 years old compared to like a little over 2,000 years old actually. But what's really interesting, it's only like two. It's the history of it. It's not a whole lot happened. And over that time, and maybe it's because they only highlight just so many dates, but yeah, it was founded by King Alethin. I'll go with that. And it was neat. He had this like birthmark on his face that looked kind of like a mountain. And before his time, dwarves were pretty much scattered across Gelspad and like little tribes, and they were sort of nomadic, a mystery race. A lot of evidence points to Gothaga, the Titan of the Forge, made them in its sort of maps, but the dwarves are like, nope. There's a little bit of evidence that it was Thulkas who made them. He's the Titan of Fire. The dwarves are like, no, certainly no dwarf follows any Titan. Like, if the dwarves were created by Gothaga or even Thulkas, they turn their back on their founder pretty early. So there's no memory or history of dwarves ever following a Titan in like written history. But up until the founding of Burok Torn, they didn't really have a lot of history. There's not a lot known about them. So who knows what happened before that? And as I said, over the global scale, it's not really that long. It's only a few thousand years. So, which sounds like it should be a long time, but when you look at the history of the Snake People or the
Yeah.
Leading Empire and all the other, it's not really that long on a scarred land scale. So it's like, Burok Torn's old. Well, compared to Shelzar, actually,
Right.
it's not.
It's a blink of an eye to a Shelzar
Yeah, exactly.
inhabitant.
So this guy basically gathers up a bunch of dwarven nomads and are like, we're gonna create our own home, our own homeland, our own place, and gather together a whole bunch of dwarven families and founded and they went wandering until they found the perfect place, and then they see this mountain that looks a heck of a lot like his birthmark, at least back
Meant
then,
to
before
be.
Cat. Yeah, meant to be. And so they go there and they start building a city there, and it's really, really, really hard and brutal. And he's like this prophetic dwarf, so he's all like it's going to just get harder, and they're like, shit, a bunch of us just died of cold and starvation, and now you're telling us it's going to get harder, and it does. And but eventually they start building Burok Torn. underneath and going in there. And it doesn't have that Lord. The nice thing is it doesn't have that Lord of the Rings edge where it's like we dug too deep and we found a monster or whatever. No, they just dig and it's kind of nice and they build these forges and they build this beautiful city. And it's like really cool. And not long into it, they met these elves who also lived in the mountains. They were basically the mountain elves. They didn't live under the mountains according to this book. They lived on the surface, but they had this like, beautiful city in the mountains that was not far from this mountain the dwarves chose. And they became friends. Like, hey, cool elves, we're dwarves, and the elves are like, hey, you're kind of funky people. Yeah, sure, we'll be friends with you. And you hate Cadam too? Yeah, we hate Cadam. Okay, cool. And they're like, all right. So they they built their underground fortress not too far from where this elven city was, and they had various little strifes. Some Titan spawn were there, and they had this whole weird thing for the longest time with Ioun beholders. So you can
And do
find
explain what the heck that is.
that is, yeah, and it's mentioned in their lore a lot. It's one of the creatures in the creature collection. I don't know if it's in the new creature collection. So you might have to look at the old ones to find this critter. But and you know what an Ioun stone is.
Yeah.
I might be again pronouncing that funny. I don't know. Ioun. They're these little crystals that have some kind of specific magic ability that fly around your head. You see them a lot in D&D where it's like there's a wizard, he's got a bunch of Ioun stones.
Right.
And you can have like a whole crap load of them, and they kind of overpower the rules in terms of like magic items because that's part of I think why 5th edition they're like you can only attune to 3 things. You can't have 19 Ioun stones flying around your head. So, but in this lore, they Ioun stones were very much a dwarven creation. Amongst their kind of runic magic, they would make these floaty stones and give them powers. And there's these weird beholders, but they don't look like your standard bunch of eyes, tentacles beholders. But these weird beholders who are just attracted to Ioun stones the way, I don't know, can't think of an analogy off the top of my head, but I was like, way Vanguard are attracted to holy people. That doesn't help. But they're attracted to Ioun stones, and they would go and basically raid dwarven vaults and treasuries and whatnot to get them. So the dwarves were all constantly fighting these Ioun beholders all the time, and so they have to like now when they have Ioun stones in their treasures, like don't have too many near each other or we'll attract these beholders and they will come and try to kill us. So put them in their own like so they'd like only one Ioun stone per treasury vault, so
Right.
that wouldn't like attract these beholders. But apparently they had lots of trouble in the early days of Burok Torn, of these monsters and various other Titan spawn, because that just sort of happens.
It's true.
Yeah. But so when the first king left, and there's a lot of this is one of those spoilers areas. They said he died, and then like his son took over, but there's also in the lore it says he didn't die, he left. He kind of said I'm done and wandered off and decided to wander the land like Cain and Kung Fu and go see the rest of Scarn. He passed it on and been king to king, and that's been a lineage ever since. And dwarves live quite a long time, so there hasn't been that many kings, since King Alathan. I didn't really look into like the details of all the kings between him and the war, but there wasn't that many.
There goes my
Half a
dog.
dozen or so. And the other thing about Alathan, which is kind of where it started, and I think what encouraged him to go try to create this unifying kingdom of the dwarves was the dwarven demigod Goran. And it's apparent that he wasn't there during this initial like gathering. And so there's a lot of rumors is Elfane is Goran, but then there's evidence that he's not. That he worshipped Goran, and Goran gave him immortality, and he goes wandering off. But how you want to run this or not, did he become a god? And it is apparent that Goran, the demigod of dwarves, was a dwarf who was uplifted. So who Goran was, it's a little bit of a mystery, but he showed up around the same time as shortly before Alathan left. So, meh, kind of funny. Do you need to roll a D because your dog's barking? And okay. If the dog is barking or the lawn gets mowed, you know why. Okay. It's just background sounds. So anyway, so bunch of kings. They're friends with these elves. Um, not much happens, and then I mean, a lot of little things happen. There, they have Titan spawn attacks, and they build a lot of cool things, um, and Kadim shows up one day and crunches half the mountain on them, and a lot happens. And eventually, the war comes along, and shortly before the war, uh, the king at the time goes and deals with this hag contingent, and has to leave the city, and goes with the army, and deals with this Titan spawn contingent, which is causing all sorts of trouble for like the region, and gets killed and or captured. Is never comes back in either case. And have been taken alive, and something horrible happened to him. But um, and then actually we know what happened. Um, his son goes to look for him and is attacked by a bone lord monster that was created from his father's bones. So, ew.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
Ew. So it's like, oh great, I have to fight my own undead dad.
Yeah. And the Bone
So
Lords are
that happened.
not super pleasant to look at anyway. I'll see if I
Yeah,
can
it's
find
like,
one and
it's
put
like
it up there.
okay. So that happens. And then that son is killed. So like we're going through a lot of kings, and it ends up going to the son's brother because there's no kids yet. So the dwarven king line gets kind of fuzzy. Um, and then Churn shows up, and all hell goes to loose. Prior to that, and I talked a little bit about Churn's this whole defeat, where the Goran, the dwarven demigod, and Nalathos, the elven, the Drendali demigod, came up with this plan, working with Madriel to take out Churn. And the dwarves and elves built this magic healing gate that was this cool gate that was basically a interdimensional thing that would you walk through it and you'd end up in another plane. And they had it set up to go to Madriel's heaven. And the idea is you walk through this gate because it's going to Madriel's heaven, you would get healed when you went through the gate. And their plan was to shove Churn through the gate because he's all about plagues, and the idea was we would heal Churn, which would make him not be so powerful, and then we could actually defeat him on the other side. And that was kind of the plan, is just sort of shove him through this gate. And it sounds really crazy because it's like, how do you move Churn? And one of the craziest parts, and I got refreshed on this when I reread this, was Churn, as with most of the Titans, is not. He's morphic. He can change his form. Like Mormo can change into a bunch of snakes. Well, Churn can change into a bunch of the best I can describe as plague ooze. It's just horrible. And so when he came and attacked Burok Torn, he didn't just like stomp, stomp, stomp Colossus and knock on things the way Gaddam would do it. He oozed his way into Burok Torn and would go down the tunnels and everything of this underground city and just infect everyone and smoosh everyone, and it was just horrible. And how do you fight a giant colossal sized ooze with showing up with an army of insect creatures and plague monsters and other things? So it sucked. And like, how do you push an ooze into this magic gate? So a whole bunch of dwarves sacrificed themselves to basically get him on this running battle, out to where they needed him to go, which was this bridge and into the gate. And and this whole plan. But then he had, and then the story goes that he had infected with kind of doubt the dwarven king or the dwarven god and the elven god and king or whoever the major decision makers were. And so when it came time to fighting him on this bridge, the dwarves didn't show up, and leaving the elves to fight him by themselves, and they got their asses kicked, and their god nearly died, and Churn basically was like, ha ha ha, I beat you all, and leaves. And Madriel doesn't get to do the magic gate thing, and I believe the gate gets destroyed, and it's just all horrible. But little that the elves didn't know at the time, the dwarves had built a second gate, built a copy of it, sort of this backup just in case thing that they didn't tell the elves about, which was dickish of them. And so, and then it's buried. It's like somewhere in Burok Torn. This whole battle doesn't take place in. It takes place in like a neighboring dwarven city, not in Burok Torn, but just outside of it. So they've got this other gate, and the Drendali elves, who have this dying god, are like, we could heal our god if we can. He can't travel. He can't do the god thing anymore. He can't travel to the astral plane. He can't travel back to his home, heaven. If we could get him to this gate and put him through it, it could heal him, and he could go back to being, one with his afterlife and get all of his god powers back. And the dwarves are like, no, you betrayed us at the bridge. And they're like, you betrayed us at the bridge. And they've been hating each other ever since. And we'll talk about the Drendali in a bit, but that kind of cemented this war.
Yeah, it is funny because there's that like Tolkien-esque dwarves always hate elves and elves always hate dwarves, and the designers, at least in third edition, started off where they were like, that wasn't a thing, and then they gave them an actual story reason why at least the dwarves of Burok Torn and the Drendali just aren't
really
friends.
hate each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, because and the Drendali, all they claim all they want is the access to the gate. They don't want to necessarily just keep the gate. They just want to be able to shove their god through it. Okay, like, can we just use it? Like,
right?
Like, please. But there's so much bitterness now, and now they've been besieging Burok Torn for 150 years. It's not gonna happen. So, and it didn't help that they went in and killed, like, one of their assassins came in and killed the current king's wife and unborn child, and the hate just escalates.
Yeah.
So it's just like one thing after another thing. And now that the king, King Thane, he hasn't been king that long. He's only been king, well, relatively, I should say. It's been about 60 years, which is quite a while, but for a dwarf, it's not that long. And he's got a new wife and a new baby, and boy, does he protects them like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
Like, you do not get to go anywhere until you're older.
I've always thought his art is very reminiscent of like the Conan at the end of every Conan movie, how Conan's like slumped on the throne.
Oh, I love it.
Where it's like, obviously he's like the king, but he's also so tired looking. Like, he's so exhausted from all of the shit he's gone through, like having your wife and your unborn child murdered and stuff. And even though he has a new wife and everything,
yeah, but it was like 40 years later that he got the new wife.
That the art just like really lends to that fact that he's been through some shit.
Yeah. So, and dwarves don't have a lot of kids, so it's not like, I got 19 children. It's like, I got 2. Wow, it's a big deal. It's like 2 or 3 kids, and you're fertile. you got a horde. So they're not known for having lots and lots of kids. So he's got this big heavy burden, but it's not just the Drendali that he's dealing with. It's not just 150 years of besiege from these elves. It's also besiege from the Calastian Empire. Our favorite bad guys. They're definitely one of my favorite bad guys.
Yeah.
So there's this place in the Kelder Mountains called Irontooth Pass. And I don't think it covers the entire words here, but it's basically how you get through the mountains without kind of going all the way around and through Ardwin's Tier. You have to go through Irontooth Pass, and this gets you from basically from Lagany to Durover and to Burok Torn, and then on out. So the dwarves control this pass, several thousand years. And then in 60 odd years ago, or not quite 60 years ago, Prince Verduk at the time, although King Verduk soon later, actually King Barduk by the time he takes Iron Tooth Pass, starts conquering all of the south, and has his mind on Iron Tooth Pass and taking down Burok Torn. Why Iron Tooth Pass makes sense because it's a huge trade area.
Yeah.
Having control of that, it really gives him control of the region. Why he's so interested in Burok Torn, we can talk about that when we get to Calastia.
Yeah,
but
that'd be great.
He's got his reasons. So the dwarves have to deal with this, and the fact that they're now also besieged not just from like underground by the elves, but from the south by the Calastians.
Yeah.
At a third enemy, they also are dealing with the gorgons, which are Titan spawn followers of Mormo, who they've been dealing with forever. Because I mentioned that they've been dealing with Titan spawn on and off for a really long time. Bulk of those were the gorgons, which are these kind of weird. Okay, you think gorgons and you automatically think Medusas, with the snaky hair,
Right.
and that should be what a gorgon is. But no, Scarred Lands made them weird. They're not that. They're something else. There are snaky women with there are women with snaky hair who can turn people to stone. I think they're just called Medusas or something.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Take the name and name the race after it. But gorgons, there's two other things called gorgons, and this is what we're talking about here, not the snaky haired lady, but they're these people who look human, men and women who look human, but they're bald. Like they literally can't grow hair. They don't have snakes for hair, but they have snakes like inside, and they open their chest cavity, all aliens, and these snakes come out of their like abdomen, and so it's like instead of hair, it's like belly snakes.
Yeah.
And they're just like these weird bald people with belly snakes who and that's gross. So it's like, okay, that's kind of nasty. And they can hide them, so they can look like people. The only distinguishing feature about them is they all look like they have alopecia. And there's like, oh, no, not good belly snakes. So they can sort of hide them under their clothes, and then just open up their shirt, and it's like, blah, belly snakes.
Right.
So
and those are those the greater or are those the lesser?
The high gorgon. They're the smart
high gorgons,
ones.
right?
And then they have the low gorgon, which look like lions, kind of, but they're like blackish lions, and they have the hair, snake hair thing going, like the ladies with the snake hair, but they're lions with snake hair, and they're called low gorgons, and they interbreed. So the high gorgons and the low gorgons make babies, and it's kind of weird.
Weird.
And the low gorgons are only a little notch above beast, so it's kind of squicky. It's like, I don't know what's going on here.
I mean, as long as they're intelligent enough to consent, I guess.
Okay. I don't want to think about it, really. So, but apparently they can interbreed, and that's a common thing. And when they're kids, some of the kids are high gorgons, some of the kids are low gorgon, and it keeps the bloodline pure or something. I don't know, but this is another enemy of Burok Torn. So they're dealing with the elves, they're dealing with the Calastians, and they're dealing with these snake people.
Yeah.
Along three fronts, and it's not good. So basically, Burok Torn has been under siege constantly for a really long time. Certainly for the last since Churn's attack, and it's been a really long time since they had any kind of sense of peace. So because even before Churn and all of that business, they were still at least dealing with the Gorgons. So at minimum, those were a threat to them. So that's and plus those weird ion beholders. So it's always been something. So that's kind of the current history. I think it's a really cool city. They've got some phenomenal maps of what Burok Torn is like with these. I don't know if you have the one where they're and they've got like massive descriptions of how this works. But it's can you picture basically a hollowed out mountain and how the mountain doesn't fall around? I'll fall down around them and how that works. But anyway, they've got this outer ring, which is where all of the foreigners who come and visit, mostly traders and whatnot, who can get through the various siege lines, mostly from the north, because I think that's about the only way you can get there without dealing with all of this stuff. Come in and they'll be like, hey, we got some Veshan traders or something like that. We'll come in, and they all reside in this ring around the city. Non-dwarves are not allowed beyond this ring without special permission. So okay, you can go in and visit the king maybe for a thing, but it's generally they're restricted to this outer ring, and that's where all the foreign homes are going to be, and that's where the market is and all that business. Then in beyond that is this central core, which is flippin' amazing. I think it's like 70 stories high, and it's all these balconies. There's like several hundred balconies, and there's this massive waterfall that runs down it. And you'd think it would just be unbearable because this waterfall is hundreds of feet. It's like Niagara Falls running through the middle of this thing. It's not water below. It's like runs into this like underground aquifer, and that's where they get their water. And it comes from the snow melt, top of the mountain and the mountains around it, and that's the water source for the city. But they put, because magic, they put all these silence spells around the waterfall, so it kind of buffets the sound, so you're not deafened by Niagara Falls in your backyard, or in your town square, effectively. So it's kind of cool. So it's like, look, it's a pretty waterfall that's not making a ton of noise, Wells.
But it would explain why like all the dwarves shout all the time if it wasn't for that silence ball. What? I can't hear you!
It would be possible. You couldn't do anything. So yeah, because I haven't been in Niagara, but I've been to other large waterfalls, and you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So I imagine, I don't think this is not as wide as Niagara, obviously, but it's like tall enough. So they've got all these funky balconies, and each one of these balconies, after the first couple of the bottom floors are like lead to forges and stuff, but after that they lead to basically houses. And each one, you go up, and it's like, how do you get? There's no stairs, and it's these magic rune elevator lifts. It's really neat. So you step on this rune, and depending on which, if you stand on the rune for like basically a round, so it's like stand on the rune for longer than a round. Depending on which rune stone you're on, it goes to another floor, and you just go to like an elevator. And it's like, so we're going to visit grandma. Okay, and you go to like wherever, or up or down, wherever grandma is, and you go into her house. So it's incredibly safe for dwarven children, It's like you don't really go anywhere. It's like you don't leave it's like, just don't go to the outer ring, Get daddy's permission before you go to the big forge. But it's like going between these little apartments is pretty cool. But then the apartments are like impossibly massive, and I'm like, how does this work without some kind of interdimensional magic stuff? And maybe that's what they're doing. I don't know. But you go up to whatever floor you're heading toward, and each dwarven house is this like really nice balcony that overlooks the waterfall and the opening and everything. And this thing's like a mile across, so it's massive. This isn't like a little tiny thing. It's a mile across. Citadel or whatever. I don't know what the term you would use, but with the hole in the roof where the water comes through. And they go in, and you go down this long hallway, and then opens up to the dwarven home, where they've got like all of their personal stuff in bedrooms and living rooms, and their own forge, because of course every dwarf has their own forge. It's like, it's my personal forge. It's small. I can only use it to make spoons. And whatever else they're gonna have, so they've got dining hall and bathrooms and servants' quarters, and they've got, if they're rich, obnoxious dwarves with servants, and maybe a little temple to Goran and whatnot. So this map's showing a kind of a typical dwarven stronghold.
Yeah, it was like the generic map for what would one of these look like. So not all of them look like this, but this is definitely like a possibility of how they would be laid out.
Exactly. So that's one option. And see, there's that long hallway, and then there's that interconnecting hallway. So you could be like, so that people next to us on the same level, you can just go down this like big, huge, several mile long circular thing, and visit your neighbors or whatever. So, and I imagine some of these are also other community locations like schools or whatever. Because not all dwarves are not every dwarf is a miner or a smith.
Right.
They do have farmers. They do have scholars. They do have other things they do because you need that. And there's some descriptions about how they do food and stuff like that, because how do you grow food in the middle of it? And they've got these funky mirrors and this whole thing. It's like somebody got really deep into this. It's like, how do you grow wheat underground? Well, we have these mirrors and we have this thing and air, and it's okay, fine, sure, you grow wheat, whatever, I don't care. It's like, but they don't have enough soil. Well, we rotate the crops with cows. It's like, okay, fine. I don't know where this is in one mountain. Mountains aren't that big. It's like, well, there's other mountains too, and we've spread out. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. Hand wave.
We found ways. We don't need to explain them to
found-
you.
It's a wizard. It's magic.
Right.
Population's not that big. Yeah. So they've got all these things, and then the other obviously big thing is this giant central forge, where it's like, well, everybody has their own spoon making forge. We have the big forge where we make all the big stuff. And yeah, it's kind of their thing. The bulk of the dwarven stuff. One other thing that dwarves have that wasn't the source of the dwarves, but that they got from the elves, was the making of golems. This is a big thing in this region of Skarn. There's a lot. I mean, they got deep into golems and the whole idea of artificial creatures. And the dwarves have them, but they got them from the elves, and those that they have are a result of that thing. So I think I've got any thoughts about dwarves, because I've got to go into the land of the Drendali elves, and this is going to get complicated. So transition thing. So the other half of this book, called Burok Torn, City Under Siege, but the other half of this book is who they're being besieged by, and not the Calastians, but the Drendali or Drendal elves. They're interesting. And they've gone through a lot of change. So originally in this book, which is not even 3x, this is 3.0. And you can tell because you read the elf description, and I'm like, this is very 3.0. Very pre 3.5 adjustments. They're called the Dark Elves of Drendal. And it's obvious when you read them that this was Scarred Lands Drow. It's like, yes, this is they're described. They're dark-skinned, white hair. Actually, dark-skinned, dark hair. They don't have white hair. They have dark hair. And they look like drow. Other than the hair color, they're pretty much described that way. And they're interesting and complicated, and in this lore, evil, but evil because of what happened, not because they've always been evil. It's clear they've always been lawful as a culture, not necessarily individuals, but as a culture. Nalathos, very much a lawful god, very much in line with that kind of thing. I kind of assumed that before the shit went down that he was lawful neutral, because it fits everything they describe about him pre-Churn. But then when Churn struck him down and he almost died, his people, who were incredibly devoted to him in ways that you don't see amongst a lot of races, that the Drendali elves are incredibly devoted to Nalathos. They, not to allow him to die, they put his substance in a golem, because they were huge in a golem magic in creating golems, and they had these golems in their city that defended their city, and so they shoved his essence into this golem to keep him alive. His turn, he was on the edge of death. And to ask Nalathos, I think he would have preferred dying. That's my opinion. Because at least maybe they could have, brought him back in the normal way, like how they eventually bring back some other gods, at least in 3X canon. But he's trapped in this golem body now, and he can't get out, and he doesn't have access to a lot of his divine abilities, and that's why he wants to go through that gate in hopes that it would heal him, that he'd get out of this thing. But he's basically this now, gargantuan golem. And now he rules the Drendali elves with an iron fist. He's gone into bitterness and darkness as alignment is unquestionably shifted to evil, and as the culture, for the most part, the Drendali elves are now pretty much lawful evil, which sucks. because of everything that happened to him, because it's just this whole bitterness. It's like, why didn't you let us heal our god? And they blamed it over for like pretty much everything. And that's kind of interesting. And in the original lore, it's like, oh, they're a parallel to the Drow. Guardlands does not have an Underdark. If you go underground, you're not going to a different dimension. But Scarlands has a massive underground. Like, you're not going to hit a magma layer in a quarter of a mile. Well, some places you will, but in general, there's like massive underground labyrinth of caves and things. And I think, make the argument that a lot of these could have been built during previous epochs, like when people were living underground because the surface was uninhabitable. Or maybe built by the Silurians, or who knows. But there's these massive underground places. And that's kind of, and you think, oh, that's where the Drendali are from. In 5th edition, it's implied that they've always been underground, but certainly in the lore of 3rd edition, it isn't. Their city, Drendal, was on the surface, and it was just this beautiful city on top of a mountain in the Keldars, like I said, a few miles from where Burok Torn is. It had been there for a long time before Burok Torn was founded. And what's really cool about it is there's only been 3 kings. And that's like in thousands of years. Like, elves live a long time, but immortal? That long? Really? And because elves and Skarn, and there's such an argument as to whether elves and Skarn were immortal or not, because I've seen some evidence that implies they were immortal, but lost it at some point, or can be slain, blah blah blah. But a la Tolkien elves, like they don't die of old age.
Right.
But then this book contradicts that, so I don't flippin' know. Like, why? It's like because like this whole explanation as to why these elven kings lived so long is explained. Because there was the founder king, his son, and then his grandson, and that's it. And the son is still alive. He just relinquished the throne because he's like, I'm tired of ruling because I've been doing it for 2,000 years. But we're looking, the first king, they don't even have his history. Like, all they know is that he was the first king to worship Nalathos, their god, and found Nalathos, and basically created the city, and kind of similar to the dwarves did, just like maybe 500 years before, or 1500, anyway, a while before, founded the city through ancient-ish history. And again, you look at the Asathi, it's not really that long ago. but certainly for God followers, he was the first follower of a god, of one of the gods of Nalathos, and they founded Drendal and all of that. His son was king for 2,000 years. That's kind of crazy. And because he, long life already with elves, and then he started dabbling in necromancy. And then he started dabbling in chronomancy, which is time magic.
Yeah.
You find it's a thing in Scarlands. Chronomancy is mentioned and talked about a lot. They study it in the Phylactric Vault, so it's definitely a thing. And so he used necromancy and chronomancy to basically become immortal. Is he a lich? He doesn't look like a lich, so I'd say no, but it's certainly some lich-like properties in this elf. And he's, like I said, he's still around. He just retired. And he was Himus. All I could think of when I read this was like himbo. It's like Himos. Himus? King Himus.
Sure.
Anyway. Sure. Oh, that's his first name. King Himus Matloth. Matlosc.
Matloss.
Matloss. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, king for a really long time. And then his son took over, King Cherith Malwad, same last name. Cherith. Cherith. And Cherith was king during the whole Churn debacle. And he's technically king in name still, but in truth, no. Nalathos is the king of the Drendali Elves. There's no question Nalathos rules, and this guy's just sort of his really more of his like, I don't want to say major domo because he's more important than that, but prime minister in a way. It's not. It's still an inherited title, not an elected title, but everything is about their god, and Nalathos really pretty much rules the Drendali Elves. So the city was on the surface and got destroyed during the war, and before the churn, before the churn thing happened. I don't remember if it was before or after, but after the churn thing happened, they basically went underground, and using their cool golem magic, have made a new city that's not in a permanent location. And this is accurate for both 3rd and 5th edition. Their city moves around, kind of not constantly, but frequently. So like every maybe months or years or so, they'll be like, pick up and move somewhere. So if you leave Drendal, good luck finding it again, because it's not going to be where, unless you left for like a day, you're not going to know where it is. Go back and it's like, oh, it's not here anymore. I can tell it used to be here. There's some bits, but it's, who knows where they went. Good luck tracking it, because they use magic and conceal where it goes. And how they do it, is least described in this book, is super cool, because it's all golems. So they've got these giant, huge and gargantuan golems who just, pick things up and go like, la la la, we'll go. Like it was like, oh, it's time to leave, let's go, and they all pick it up. But not just golems that look like people, 2 arms, 2 legs with a head, but they've got golems that look like objects. And they're basically walking walls. And according to this text, and I made the joke before that Dren probably means dark, because you have the Drendali Elves, and you have Drendari, who's the goddess of shadows.
Right.
According to this book, it means wall. So I was disappointed to have learned this when I read this earlier today. I was like, oh, it means wall. Oh, that's so disappointing. But Drendari isn't the goddess of walls. She's the goddess of shadows. How does that work? So, whatever. I don't know. I don't care. Care enough to care. So anyway, they've got these golem walls that just basically pick up and go, do. We're gonna go to our new location, and they know how to do it. And just like, analysis is like, it's time to move, and they're just like, they all activate and stand up and carry their things, which also explains why most of the buildings are just a story high, because it would be hard to build these colossal things, except for the main citadel where Nalathos and the king and the rulers live and work, which is a golem in itself. It's this colossal building golem that just picks up and walks. So it's pretty cool. It can defend them too. It's like a building smash as a final defense should the city ever get attacked.
I was kind of disappointed. So the artwork for it was just so tight. So it's like super thin.
Yeah.
To really
it's like,
comprehend that is supposed to be a golem, or even a building, it was just like a little like, that's sad. But yeah, that's what that is.
It's the city. So yeah, it's neat. Now they made some major changes with the Drendali in 5th edition, which I would say are controversial at best. And I'm not necessarily pleased about them. I will admit this right off the bat. I'm not happy with a lot of these changes, mostly because I really am constantly impressed by just the expansive lore of these books that had come out back then. And when I'm fine with simplifying things to an extent. I'm fine with, obviously, 5th editionizing things like magic and spells and things like that to make sense in the new systems. And how do we deal with that? And it's a huge challenge. But they made some changes that I'm just like, really? Like, first off, the 5th edition book implies they were always underground. That they didn't, they weren't, on the surface at one point and went under to hide and to protect themselves, but that they were always underground, or at least as long as, for several thousand years, not just 150. But the biggest change is not, well, maybe that's the biggest change, but the biggest, the physical change is they changed what they look like. So originally they were obviously some kind of parallel to drow, dark skin, dark hair, but parallel to drow. Now they've flipped that, and they're albino pale, with light hair. So they've gone from dark skin, dark hair to like negative on the picture, and they're now light skinned, light hair, not albino eyes, normal elven eyes, but not forsaken elven eyes, normal elven eyes, like there's whites and then color. But otherwise they're super super pale, and there's like, well, that makes sense because they live underground, and it was like, they've only used to live underground 150 years. And most of them are still alive, so why would their skin tone change in their own lifetime?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. So, and then you also have one of the most famous Drendali elves, Dartan, who's the head of the Penumbra Lords, who's dark skinned, and they kept him having dark skin.
Yeah, is
I
he the
feel
one
like
that's
that's
on the
because
cover of Wise and the Wicked?
he's the one that's on the yeah, he's the one on the cover of Wise and the Wicked. So he's still dark, but they're like, oh, he's dark skinned because of magic, So he's like the exception. It's like, oh god, okay. And I remember when this first showed up, when the PDF, they hadn't even printed the SLPG yet. The PDF had come out for the backers Kickstarter. And I remember reading the comments, and somebody's like, they whitewashed the Drendali. Holy crap! I can't believe they did this. This is horrible. Like, one of the only black races in Scarlands, and they whitewash him, and the other black race was evil too. So it's like, okay, because the other one would be the Chardini Dwarves, who they didn't change the color of. The Chardini Dwarves are still dark skinned. And like, okay. And we're talking about this on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be like, okay, so now we're gonna talk about Skarn and race, and be really uncomfortable white people talking about Skarn and race. Because there's a lot of that. Race is a big deal in D&D.
I've definitely talked about this in previous episodes because, like, orcs, for example, definitely have other races that are not their allies, not their friends.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is because of what they chose to do during the war, and therefore they're literally like the enemy. And that mentality has carried on to be, I don't like you because you're an orc, which is racism. But it didn't start with, it's because you look the way you do. It started because they were the enemy.
Out of the war.
Right.
Yeah. You picked the wrong side, and you were, and so you're the... And the orcs are, even though in Tolkien's Uruk-hai they're black, orcs are green. Like, right. They're like, are they meant to be this... I'm not going there. I'm just not... I can't speak to this. So I'm not going to.
And a lot of times, I mean, as a monster designer and someone who's written their own world, like, a lot of times you just make design choices that are like, this race is going to be purple because.
Yeah.
And
so,
go ahead.
So the question really is, why did they make this decision? And I don't know. I haven't spoken to the creators. I didn't really see a good answer. One piece of information I did, I found a small answer, which was to make them not look like the drow, so that WotC won't sue us. So it's like, they're not the drow. They're not black. They're not the drow.
Right.
And so there's that, but they're still got that they're the evil elves. But then one of the other changes they made, also interesting, is they uneviled them. So in the 3X, it was, they were the most devout to their god of any non-Titan spawn. There's Titan spawn who are more devout to their Titan, but in terms of worshipping a god as a race, only the Charduni Dwarves come as close as the Drendali Elves to devotion to their god. They sacrifice everything for Naltha. But they weren't really playable. There was some stats you could play one, and it'd be like, but you would be weird, and it would be unusual, and blah.
Exactly like drow.
Yeah, exactly like drow. You're dritz.
Right.
You're like one of the 6 drow.
Prior to 5th edition, in order to play a drow, you were essentially dritzed because you had to have a reason to not be a lawful evil creature.
Worship a wolf. Yeah. So it was like, So, and And in the same thing, because you get that level adjustment to play a Drendali elf back in 3X, that whole thing was there. So you can't play anything with a level adjustment, you're paying some kind of cost. Well, they're a playable race, no level adjustment, no wackadoo, you can just play a Drendali. And the description in 5th edition says, and this goes to my whole theory of 5th edition is like everything jump forward 10 years, but it's like 10 years where things would be but roll back.
Right.
It's like a lot of progressive shit happened in those 10 years, apparently, to the elves, because a lot of the elves are now like, or implied that they were always embittered, and certainly in the 3rd edition book, describes this horrible, rampant, terrible caste system where, like, if you're a farmer, you're basically almost a slave, and they have slaves, and then, like, if you're a warrior, you're above the farmers, and if you're a priest, you're above the warriors, and it's like Babylon 5 shit with the Mambari. Sorry, I just went out to something from like nobody knows what I'm talking about. Like, any B5 fans out there? No, but okay. Anyway, so they're like really caste based and nasty. All of that's gone, or at least it's not described in 5th. I wouldn't say it's gone because there's there's a whole half a book on them in here, and there's like 4 paragraphs on them in the new text, so there's not a lot of room for this description. But it's said that a larger percentage of the race is basically just affected by this and going, I'm not fanatical follower of Nalathos. I don't think we should have abandoned our relationship with the dwarves of Burok Torn, or okay, screw them, but I don't think we should be isolationist to the rest of Skarn, or for whatever the reason, there are a lot of refugees of the Drendali who've fucked off, and like, we're gonna go live in the Ganges, or we're gonna go live in Calastia or whatever, and not be there.
And it kind of makes sense because when you're following a lawful neutral god, and that god over time becomes a lawful evil god, no matter how devoted you are, once that ideology starts changing, you can stop and say, well, I don't want to do that. I need to change my own life and go over here and live with the ganja elves. you know, like, that's
100% behind that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that change a lot. I like but I mean, the way I look at it is similar to the Slytherin, is that those Drendali who've been like, we're gonna leave, are not a majority. They're sort of an exception, and like, basically, because. So I don't know the implication here. The implication in the new book is like they're kind of a rising force and they're trying to make change, which is great. But like, how do you play that out? Okay, we've got an oppressive government. Are we going through this right now? It's like, oh shit. So farmers' lives matter. I don't know. I don't have these maps.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I could speak to it, but.
And I think a lot of the problem is there have been major changes between 3rd and 5th edition. So if you do have all of the lore from 3rd edition and you're looking at the 5th edition book, you're like, what just happened? And there's no explanation. And 5th edition in general is that way because, I mean, you can't see it, but I mean, there's so many lore books from 3rd edition that are just like, here's the Forgotten Realms in 70 books. And 5th edition, they're like, so we'll throw some breadcrumbs into an adventure and you can do with that what you will.
Yeah. And a lot of it's, anyway, going into WotC stuff, a lot of it doesn't make any sense either. Because because they've done 1-to-1 conversions.
Yeah.
It's like you can play Tomb of Horror in 5th edition that looks just like Tomb of Horror in 3rd edition. It's the same map, same traps. It's just, they literally just map new rules and new monster stats and everything. But it doesn't make sense in the universe fitting anymore. Like, where does this go? And what does this have to do with, all this other stuff going on in Waterdeep? I don't know. Like, or if you played Neverwinter Nights or whatever, and it's like, what does this have to do with Neverwinter? Now there's a road? What? I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's a problem all over in the whole remapping of, like, and we do this to ourselves every 20 years with D&D. Like, we did it when we went to. We also did it when we went from 2nd to 3rd. It's not like this is new. It's just that we, had there was such a rampant of so many books that came out.
Yeah.
When 3rd edition came out, because of the OGL, I think. And then 4th edition kind of crippled everything. And then 5th edition comes out like, oops, we fucked up. Here you go. We're back. We're back to where we were in 3rd, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love 5th edition as a GM. It's so easy to run. I hate it as a player. It's so nerfed.
There's definitely
I
that
missed-
every time
missed
in some I don't know, as an adventure designer, I always like going all the way through. Like going,
Yeah.
you start off and you're just this random person, and maybe you have a backstory, maybe you don't, but you play through to epic level because it's the progression of your character, and you become epic, and like you are this force in your world. And there really isn't that feel in 5th edition. There are third parties that have like made that kind of thing, but in the general sense, like they removed so much of the epicness, like the ability for you to really stand out as a character. Now fighters are fighters, and there's not a lot that really changes.
It feels more class system.
Yeah.
Even though you can be a fighter with spell casting, I don't know. Anyway, it's a totally different topic.
Yeah.
So why did they change the Drendali? Why did they? I don't know why they changed the Drendali so much, but they did. So in here, I pulled out the book just to quote the 5th edition, because this is the thing that was like, to me, the biggest. And I remember reading this when this PDF came out, going, the fuck. Is not both trying to. Okay, the description of Drendali is like, no, they're jerks and they do this thing and all of that. But the description of the Drendali as a playable race goes counter to that. Because you read the elf description, there's a sidebar of you can play an elf, you can play a Ganges elf, which is i.e. a wood elf, or you can play a Drendali elf, i.e. a dark elf, but they're not dark elves because they're not dark. They're weird. And when it comes to 50 stats, it's literally like, do you want to play a druid or a ranger, or do you want to play a magic user or a wizard? Because when you look at the stats, it's like, oh, one of them I get a dex bonus, and the other one I get a charisma bonus and dark vision. Okay.
Right.
Seems to be the difference. Or wisdom bonus, yeah. So it's like charisma bonus, I want to be an elf as a sorcerer. A wisdom bonus, I want to be an elf as a cleric, And Drendali have better dark vision. And that's kind of, and they know, and a cantrip a la drow or tiefling, they get a cantrip. So, but the description, not all Drendali support this war with Burok Torn. Here it is. In fact, many of the long-lived Drendali have had fruitful relationships with the Dwarves until the war was declared. Some resisted the war effort, carefully denouncing Nalathos and the war fought by their Drendali kin. Drendali refugees and objectors have appeared here and there throughout Gelspad as a result. Now, based on that description of the Burok Torn book, and based on even the description of the city in this book, if you objected to Nalathos while living in Drendal, they would kill you. I mean, there's no, you would have to have the underground movement where and this is just a city. This isn't like a country.
Right.
This is like, there aren't places to hide.
I feel like you could have spoken out or chosen not to, but it was like a thing you did on your way out the door. You left a note that said, this kind of sucks and I'm leaving because of it. And I'm not putting my forwarding address because I know you will come to kill me.
Exactly. It's like, no, you don't easily rebel against this, because if you try, your god will come and smooch you with his big iron, literal lead fist. So it's like, no. Okay, lead is relatively soft metal, but still,
compared to flesh, it's definitely harder.
Yeah, it will kill you. Bad. So and the walls will smush you because they all work for him, and so it's like, rebel in the city of sentient walls. and robot golem things everywhere, and I can't imagine a more iron fist to roll under than this place. Yeah, and if you leave, you can't come back because you don't know where the city went. So it's when you leave, you are gone forever.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna have to use some hella magic to find this to get back there. You know, and I would say Drendali, you know, in 5th edition is one of those cities that does not have a teleportation ring. You're not getting back there
Right.
easily. So that's them. As for like, how do I feel about the one less dark skinned race? This is something I'm disappointed by. Because they made it so you can play a Drendali easier. They gave you this reason, and then you can't be like the. But there's also the every dark skinned race is evil. We don't want yet another one of that, and
Right.
that's a problem in standard D&D. That's a problem.
Yeah.
In
And from my
yeah,
my point of view, that's why they changed the way they looked, because there has been an
yeah,
outgoing movement, saying that you can't say that a race is evil and then color them a certain way, literally, because that's racism. And
yeah,
to an
unquestionably.
extent, yes, it is, and it really depends on how you treat it. Like, yes, in 5th edition and previous editions, there is wording in books that really shouldn't be there because it is poorly thought out. I can't think of, again, I'm going to go back to half orcs. There was a way that they essentially said that orcs that you were that you would play are, oh man, what is the word? It's a really, really terrible way to say it, because essentially, like, if you're an orc or half orc and you're leaving this society, this culture of violence, and um, we're gonna call it societal evil. Like,
Yeah,
cultures are gonna view you as evil because you were out raiding and burning and stuff like that
yeah,
as a culture. Um,
yeah.
if you decide to leave that, you are making that choice on your own. It's not somebody, it's not the white guy came in and saved you from it.
That's uh, blah, blanking on the word too. And this has been actually a thing for Scarred Lands that we've been trying so hard to not do
Yeah.
again. Colonialism,
Yeah.
maybe is that what you're talking about?
I mean, yeah, so it's not the word that they used.
Okay, yeah.
I'll see if I can find it. But yeah,
Well, when you said that not letting the white guy.
I mean, essentially, it's like these people have been trained to be good instead of like just being good people. It was just a really terrible way of saying it.
Yeah.
That's not exactly how they said it, but it was something along that lines. And it's like that's not the case. Like, there are good people in all societies. There are evil people in all societies. And if you have a
Well, yeah.
violent society, um, as on the design side of things, you have to have bad guys. And back in the day, it was way easier to make, when this came from a war game. So it was just like, we have humans and dwarves and elves. And I mean, if you want to get into like bigotry and the way things are worded, like, you had fighting man was like what your character was, or you had elf
Yeah.
and dwarf. Like, there wasn't, the original
Yeah, there
designers
weren't
didn't think
classes.
about this stuff. And does that make them racist? I don't know them, so I can't say
Well, it
that.
was invented by a
But
bunch of white guys, so there's certainly at minimum a level of
ignorance,
non-understanding and
yeah.
Perspective. So how many black game designers out there? I know one, and he made Cyberpunk. So not D&D. So, and he's awesome, by the way. He's actually a friend of mine.
And I'm still looking forward to that game.
So,
where...
but anyway, but I did want to mention, I didn't want to drop this because I'd be remiss not to, that WotC made an announcement literally this week
Mm-hmm.
that they're going back and revising a lot of that text around races like the Drow and descriptions to be like, more inclusive.
Yeah.
How they do that, I don't know. And I'm just sitting and reading that, going, we kind of already did this with Scarlands a few years ago. You know?
Right.
like we've been making this shift.
And
So
it is hard because, yes, like when you take away, if you had a race in third edition and you are taking away that is colored whatever color they are, and you take that away and make them white, it is going to piss people off. No matter if your intention was good or not. What were you saying?
My lame thing, the minimum thing I can do about this as a creator and a freelancer, not no control over where Scarlands is going beyond my books, is I've been trying to make more diversity in the other races. So if you're playing a Ganges elf, you're not white. You're brown. You live in the frickin' woods. You spend all day outside. You know, you were, as a race, I don't see them as the Legolas-looking, pale-skinned, white, blonde elves. To me, they're the darker skin, darker hair, running around in the woods elves. So it's like when I think of Ganges elves, I'm picturing them brown, not white, or I'm trying to.
I mean, it makes sense.
Or black, or just not Caucasian.
Yeah.
like make them different.
There's also
and they did that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, they did that with the human races too. Like, they don't ever say like, oh, these look Asian, or these look African, or these look whatever. But there's 4 main human races on Skarn, and one is clearly Caucasian. They're the Albadians. They look Nordic, blonde, tall, white people. But then there's 3 other distinct ethnicities amongst humans that don't look Caucasian. The Lydians, who are like the nobility, look more Caucasian-ish, but they're more Mediterranean-y. They're more. There's a little bit of they're described as olive complexion. And then there's the darker-skinned Gascari and the darker-skinned Elzens. So the majority of humans in Gelspad are not Caucasian, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
And whenever, but although the default is people play a character who looks like them, so a lot of players will be like, they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's like, when you describe your character, be conscious of that.
Absolutely. And it absolutely, the face of the game is so much art as well. And so when, as a design company moving forward, people really need to think about the art that's going in. Is there a vast majority of men compared to women? Is there a vast majority of white, whatever race? Do you have a reason that humans need to all be white? Because that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No.
Like even orcs, they're not going to be a single shade of green. In fact, they even talk about how they're really
teal.
like right. There's like a gamut of being shades of brown and other colors that are tinted with this green, and it doesn't make sense for your book to have just any one color of creature, and so it's definitely weird when they backpedal something like the Drendali and make them white. That was maybe a poor choice.
Maybe. And their reasoning. I mean, saying we needed to get away from the drought is fair, especially if they're worried about Watsy getting pissed.
Right.
Saying, it's because they live underground pissed me off, because it was like, they
maybe
didn't though.
Maybe that's why they changed the actual history of them, is that.
So now they lived underground.
To make them make sense, they had to.
And honestly, it's not that big of a deal that they can say that. I mean, what difference did that make? Probably not that much of a one. I mean, You can still say the old city of Drendali, the ruins are here, and it's still X miles from Burok Torn, and you just have to go underground to get there. And the bridge that the battle took place at Churn was underground, not on the surface. And these aren't that big. These aren't huge changes overall. And the new Drendali is this mobile city underground. And it's like, we can go to the ruins of the one that was destroyed. Yeah, it's like, okay, fine, we can do that. it only changes things a little bit. So you can have that as your, but it just irritated me. It was like, because they live underground. I was like, they didn't, but they didn't, for good reason. But so twofold, yeah, that and getting away from, dark skinned bad guys. So I look at it as this is my attempt, my pathetic attempt. Our main character in Vigilant is multiracial. That's my pathetic attempt. And I've been trying to talk to people who I've gone and had conversations with people about, like, how do I build this multiracial character? I've asked multiracial people, what would this look like? How would this character think and feel, and how would this affect their life and what they do and the decisions they make? And they've given me feedback, and it's been great. So that's been awesome. And like one of the lines was like, people don't know what race I am. They assume, and half the time they're wrong. And so I've literally in book 2 been doing that a little bit more with Eacade, that people aren't sure what race he is.
Yeah.
So they're like, so what are you? And he's like, me. Because he doesn't give a fuck either. Anyway, so he's like, he's like, I don't even know what race I am. I don't care. Yeah. So.
And
but
one
he does.
thing, there's one thing that, and we're just kind of going all over the board and have lost the Scarlet specific thing, but like another thing you can do as a player that wants to explore into other, or as a designer that wants to explore into playing characters that aren't like you, is not attributing real world cultural sim like things to that character. This isn't going to make any sense to anyone because it's my own world, but like there are characters in my homebrew world that are humans or whatever, that are different skin tones or whatever, and I didn't go in and say, because this brown person is Hispanic, because that doesn't make sense. You're not you're not on Earth. Yeah. But it doesn't make sense that these people wouldn't have skin tones that vary depending on where they're from, depending on how much sun they've had, depending on their lineages, all of these things. Don't take those things from the real world. It doesn't make sense. And when you do, it is kind of being dickish.
And I need to backpedal on something I just said, though. I said that Eacade implied that he didn't care what race he is, and that's actually not what I meant. He doesn't, he's not race blind. He's not like, it doesn't matter what race I'm. No, he cares, but he doesn't. It's more like how people react to him, and that. And he's just like, you want to be a dick because you think I'm Elzen or you think I'm Lydian. Yeah. I'm just going to use that against you. It's more like that. It's like if they start to be racist to him, he can just kind of flip the story, which is like a strange multicultural privilege, I guess he has, because he can be perceived as almost any race because he's multiracial. So he can be like, I'm Elzen. I look Elzen, kinda. Like, you've got blue eyes, dude. Yeah, but. It's like, well, or whatever. You could pass for different races. And it's like, because that's what my friend told me. He's like, I can pass for 3 different races. People don't know. And it's like this weird privilege of like, are you Hispanic? Are you black? Are you white? And he's like, nobody can tell. Right. And they get it wrong all the time. They don't know. And it's like, oh, that's Eacade's thing, is nobody can tell. It's like, so it is important to him, but when he's interacting with assholes, right. It's like, you don't need to know,
right? Because
it's not important for you. It's nothing to do with our interaction. So that's what I meant. Like, he's not. It isn't. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm doing
absolutely.
a terrible job at explaining it. But yeah. So I've been trying to learn. It's like, I think that's my thing. That's why I feel like what we need more voices in this community for creators and of people from different backgrounds, and we're trying our best. Those of us who aren't enough different backgrounds, because I was joking before, I'm 0.02% not white, which is pretty small. not 2%, 0.02%. But so but I can bring in the LGBT aspects of things from my own experience, and so and I can bring in assigned female at birth things in my experience. So I can at least bring that in if I can't, and try my best to listen and leverage and interpret in my own best ability way of what it's like to be something else. Because none of us know what it's like to be an elf
Right.
in real life. None of us know what it's like to be a wizard in real life. So we can use our imaginations for that much.
Yeah.
But I at least try to base it on experiences that real people have had and what they've explained it to me as best. So that's my silly mission. So to me, Ganges elves are brown. In my world, in my setting, when you meet a Ganges elf, they're flippin' brown.
Right.
And the Forsaken elves are white, the Ganges elves are brown, and the Drendali are whatever the player wants them to be.
Yeah.
I don't care. If they're pale, they're pale. If they're dark skin, they're dark skin. And that's how I'll run the Drendali elves based on if anyone actually plays one. That's all I'm gonna say about it. It's
Totally. So Ronald Valor, I have not been ignoring your stuff. You have a lot of great comments that you put in. I just want to address a couple of these because they're really great ideas. Rebuilding on a complicated foundation takes a lot of thought and sometimes is messy, repeated reworking. It's absolutely true. Everyone that has been designing games since the beginning of D&D has made some kind of mistake, and it's great when people can step back and look at their mistakes and accept them and then change what they did wrong. And it can be messy because you're probably going to piss somebody off on whatever side of things are, because there's going to be the people who are like, you should change this, and then if you do, there are going to be people who are like, why did you change that? You're not always going to please everybody, but yeah, you should be thoughtful about what you're designing. And the fact that WotC, Onyx Path, these companies have sat down and bothered is a great step forward. Can they do more? Absolutely. Everyone can always do more, but it is a great thing that they purposefully, in the main D&D books, put black female fighters in there. That was awesome. And I feel like it's one step in the right direction, that we are just continuing down that path. Is it always going to be right? Should they have made the Drendali elves pasty? No, it's not always going to be right.
I don't know.
But you can only try it, and if it doesn't work, then you say, well, I'm sorry, and mean it, and then do what you need to change it. And go ahead.
I watched a playthrough of a group playing Scarred Lands at the Onyx Path convention last weekend. I played in one, I ran one, and I watched one. And the one I was watching was one of the something of the Serpent Holds. It's actually on the Onyx Path channel. And 3 of the 5 players cosplayed, which I thought was freaking awesome. This was an incredibly diverse group of players. I think 1 or 2 might have been trans. A lot of them were otherwise women. One was playing a Manticora and had like cat ears, and it was really neat. And one was playing a Drendali. And they were pink.
Yeah.
And I was like, so there's your answer to the controversy.
Right.
They weren't white. They were like Pepto-Bismol pink, like lavender pink, not pink skin. No, they were like freaking pink.
Yeah, that's the character
like
is Marigold,
pink.
and Marigold is fabulous.
Okay.
I'm currently playing in a Legend Lore game that pulled characters out from different Onyx Path worlds. So obviously Marigold and Zasa, who's a Asathi, were pulled from Skarn, and then I'm playing a Pugmire character, and there's another Pugmire character. So we're dogs that have been pulled
Player.
from. What's
Do you
that?
literally know the player I'm talking? Do you literally know the player I'm talking
So
about? Because
that's
that's the first time
Rune.
I'd ever seen them, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Holy crap! It's a pink Drendali."
And the fact that
there's
like
your answer.
they go through all the time to do all their cosplays and everything is so entertaining. Like, I wish I had that amount of time and skill. And
My skin. I've done makeup cosplay once,
yeah,
and my skin was just like, you do not want to do this on any kind of regular basis. Like, my skin was so angry with me, and
yeah,
I had like the most like hurt. Yeah. So, and I was like, not gonna. And I was playing, questionable. Like, should you have cosplayed that, or was that offensive?
yeah.
I don't.
That is such a great point because if you are a cosplayer, um, the unfortunate part. So I have a friend who just recently posted that he wished he looked enough like some of the things he wants to cosplay as, and it kind of broke my heart because man, do what you want to do. You know what I mean? Um, it doesn't matter what you look like. You should do the things you wanna.
I'm a firm believer in you don't have to look just like the character. And oh my God, there's some amazing cosplays out there where you don't have to wear like gobs of makeup to
Right,
look a different species. You know, if you want to be a blue Twi'lek, go for it, but
right,
you don't have to.
right.
And uh, yeah, that's one of the reasons I got into the cosplay I was getting into, because it was a really accessible one. Because you throw in a funky T-shirt and jeans and you look like one of the characters from the thing. So it was like, this is an easy one. It's really easy to cosplay.
I need to go in and change my chat stuff because anytime Fran is talking about things in caps, it's like, don't do that, Fran. I don't care.
You were
Fran can
playing a
talk in all
troll.
caps if she
Yeah,
wants
I was
to.
playing I had grayish blue skin. I was playing a Homestuck troll.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, wait, was that blackface? It's like, it was gray. It was an alien. like, and the people were like, is that black? Oh God, I don't know. I don't mean it to be. I'm playing an alien. I'm not
Right.
playing a human.
And the unfortunate part is today with the internet, there can be so many things taken out of context because people might not have known you were playing a troll and they might just think you're just being racist ass. So sometimes it's better.
He's
to
also in
err
this
on...
blue pirate suit. I don't think anybody. And I had
I would
horns.
hope not. I would hope
I had
not.
like red and yellow horns, and it was kind of obvious that I was some kind of weird alien and not,
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. But it's like nobody questioned that cosplay, but I know other people who played other Homestuck trolls who got accused of blackface. So it's
Yeah.
like, but can a black kid play a Homestuck? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've reimagined all of those characters as multiracial.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about
And
cosplay is
yeah,
it is a reimagining. You're owning that thing that you were such a fan of, and that's beautiful. I think.
I think it's wonderful, and I think that's what I love about fantasy stuff, is it brings community together. Anyway, totally off topic. Yeah, I don't know if we answered the question. Is it good or bad, or why they did
Right.
it? I don't know, but
I don't know if there is a correct answer because there are so many varying opinions on things. But I will give them this. I applaud their, if that's why they changed it, because they want to get away from the concept that dark skinned characters, dark skinned creatures are bad. That's a terrible concept, and so if that's why they changed it, kudos for you guys.
Same here.
Maybe you could have made them blue or something. The pale thing,
Neat.
if they've been underground for so long, totally makes sense. Like every time I see a Druagar or a Snifferbliflin gnomes, I'm just like, why are they?
No one can pronounce that word.
Yeah. It shouldn't be pronounced by human tongues.
Is that Arneson or Gygax? Who do we blame for that
one? But every time I see art of one, I'm just like, other than being, if they were actually like made of stone, why are they dark skinned? It doesn't make sense. But
and the Charduni,
that is also,
dwarves are still dark skinned.
Yeah, but that is also assuming that they evolved like things evolve
Yeah.
on Earth. Like, if their god, Chardoon,
Which,
made them this way, totally makes sense.
yeah, which he did, because But we'll talk about the Charduni in some other future
Right.
talk if you want to. They're a whole nother kettle of, and that's a whole nother kettle of elves and dwarves who hate each other. Because we're maintaining that stupid stereotype.
Right. I do
But also,
appreciate that they at
yeah.
least tried. They were like, in the beginning,
In the
this
beginning.
wasn't a thing. But then,
Yeah,
for this reason, it's a thing.
and the elves of Burok Torn are friends with the elves of the Ganges. So, they don't have any beef with them, and the Ganges elves have no beef with the elves with the dwarves. In fact, they're like, yes, we don't want the Calastians coming this far north. Not that it's really a problem. They'd have to get through the blood steps, and that's not happening. But because this is proven protecting the southern of the Ganges, but the Ganges, the token elves, and I mean that in terms of smoking, not
right. Yeah, before with all of this, I was discussing about how I can't say Ganges elves without thinking they were just smoking when they made them. Like, we need to make some really high elves. We'll make them forest elves that sit around and smoke a lot.
the Ganges elves.
The Ganges elves, right?
I would not be surprised. I have no idea, but yeah. And the only other thing I did forget to mention about the Drendali, because it's so pervasive across all of Skarn, that I kind of forget to mention this, but they're huge into tattoos.
Yeah.
Every elf, like Ganges elves, are also huge into tattoos. Drendali elves are no exception. They're huge into tattoos. The difference is, at least in the 3X, the Drendali's tattoos glowed in the dark. I don't even know if they glow in the dark in the new book.
Yeah.
The one picture we have of an elf has no tattoos, so I'm like, I don't even know.
And the 3rd edition tattoo adept that is a Drendali is so hard to tell, because obviously it's hard to, they have a black and white image of a black-skinned elf that it does have on her leg. She has like a swirly thing, but yeah, they're supposed to be super tattooed up.
Because remember, just to remind the viewer, these old books were almost all in black and white.
Right.
So the covers really were the only things that were in color. Unlike the new books, which have like tons of color, which is great. But it's hard to tell. So, but yeah, I have seen some art where Drendali elves have like these glowy green, cool glowing tattoos. And so, and tattoos are huge in Scarred Lands, so you can't be an elf who doesn't have them. And the Drendali elves are given tattoos when they're like kids, non-magical ones. They get magical ones too. So, and they're like, in this, they're described as for their caste. It's like, here's the caste you're born to. Here's your tattoo. You're in that caste forever. It's like right on your forehead.
Right.
I'm not kidding. It's like,
yeah,
forehead, you're a farmer.
Like she has the tattoo adept one definitely has the tattoo right above her brow. And it's just kind of like that triangular thing. There wasn't really, they didn't really do a lot for art for the caste system, not like the Slytherin, like how each brood had a banner and some like awesome symbol that like they were like, hey, I'm a foamer and I'm proud of it. This, for whatever reason, 3rd edition didn't really go in the direct, like they didn't own up.
Warrens of the Ratman did come out later.
What's that?
Yeah, Warrens of the Ratman did come out later, and there's not a lot of pages devoted to the casts of the Drendali.
Right,
so there's only like 4 casts, so 3 or 4 casts.
So it's harder to say what those tattoos are supposed to be, but
they actually described them. Like the farmer one looks like wheat, and the fighter one looks like lines. I don't know. They describe them, but they're just like lines on your forehead. Go for it. It's not really gone into much detail.
Right.
The clerical cast looks much like a lump of lead on a gold chain. So, like warriors, clerics, farmers, and royal cast is a small teardrop. So they do describe them, but it's like there's no pictures. There's just a written description. So you kind of got to guess.
And how do you tattoo a lump of lead? It's just like
no. Yeah. Actually, there's farmers, merchants, warriors, spellcasters, royals, and clerics. So there's actually quite a few castes.
So is
And
this
they all
is the spellcaster one what she has on the?
probably
That would be my guess because she's
that would be
very
my guess. Yeah.
spellcastery looking and tattoo
Arcane
adepts.
spellcaster, it's a jagged lightning bolt in the center of the forehead.
No, that's not what that is.
Oh, then it's probably the cleric one?
Could be.
I don't know. Or the royal one, which is like a teardrop. Actually, that looks like the royal one, I guess. So much as you can see it.
Right.
They're not that good. Yeah. And then like merchant labor is circles with lines rating out in all angles. Warriors is 4 diagonal slashes, and farmers looks like a line with 3 vertical slashes rising on it that's supposed to resemble a field of wheat. You grow wheat underground? No, you don't.
Because they have mirrors.
No, you don't. You don't grow. That's the dwarves. The Drendali elves do not have the mirrors because they're moving around all the time. They grow lichen and mushrooms. They do not grow flippin' wheat. They do actually. It's described. They this weird like mossy lichen stuff that grows underground. It's all glowy in the dark. So anyway, they got those. I don't know if so. Tattoos, big deal for the Drendali elves, and a lot of the tattoos glow, and a heck a lot of their magic. And there's rules on magical tattoos in the SLPG for 5th edition, which are a whole other caboodle, but I love it. And yes, get magic tattoos for your characters because they're fun.
Yay! Yeah, Monarch, my Minotaur, he actually, so Travis has allowed me to rather get tattoos. On his horns, he has like carvings on his horns, which has been amazing. So like instead of like going to get a tattoo, he's like chiseling out parts of his horns. I love thoughtful DMs that are like, yeah, make it your own. Do it. So, I think that wraps up our Drendali and Burok Torn Dwarves. But I do want to say we've talked about some sensitive subjects today.
Yep.
I know there will be varying opinions. If you have other ideas or other comments that you want to share, other ways to move forward with this, all of these, it's not just a matter of race. It's sexism. It's identity. It's how do we as designers help all of these communities? Drop us a message, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, message me on Twitter, whatever, because these are things that we need to keep talking about. And I kind of want to do like a whole episode that isn't a Scarland specific or any setting specific and talk about racism and sexism and all of this stuff, because it is something that the conversation needs to keep going.
Completely agree, and with more voices than just pasty white people talking about it.
It's so true.
I'm pretty pasty anyway. I'm Scottish.
There is that certain reality that for many years the people that have been designing things at the top level, and then all of us that have been playing since the early 80s or before, we are now middle-aged white people, and it is great to see that changing. It is great to see people of all walks of life, of all cultures, of all identities joining this cult, like this community. It makes me weepy in a good way.
Well, even women playing was like a rarity back in the 80s and 90s. So so never mind, like it was all white guys. It was all it's like, and then they're like, anyway, totally another topic. I don't want to get into that.
I read an amazing article about
another topic. Topic for a different day.
I feel like her name was Lee Gold. I know her first name was Lee. I can't think of her last name. And the crap she went through, she was publishing like third-party stuff essentially for D&D back in the 70s and 80s, and the crap she had to deal with from the people that were in charge back then because they didn't like what she was doing, and she was a woman, and that sucks. And it's great to see that that is, for the most part, changing. Like you still have your assholes who are out there that are just stuck in this weird mentality of they can't change. Um, but I love the fact that you guys have an awesome book out there. You have games that you're creating. Um, I shouldn't use the word guys when I say that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So does she. Yeah, we're trying. We're trying to be. We're including our crap. We've put in lots of gay characters. We've put in a trans character yet because it's hard in D&D. So see a wizard, you're done. No one can tell. So it's like, but we're gonna try to put at least more non-binary characters in.
Yeah.
In future books. But we have our plethora of LGB characters at least. And tried to diversify that from the lens of a minimally multiracial, straight cis white guy, not white guy, straight cis. I just said not white guy, straight cis guy who's learning, and that's the lens we intentionally built to be like you're looking from this perspective. And while he's got a little bit of diversity in terms of his ethnicity, not in terms of race, because in Scardlands race isn't about ethnicity, it's about dealing with rat people and horse people and snake people, and that's where the racism is.
Right.
And then dealing with he's being exposed to all these other things, and what his lens looks like and how he interprets it, and how he deals with it. Oh, my best friend has a crush on me. Crap. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with it? Because I don't have romantic interest in him. How do I deal with that respectfully without ruining it? And like we've put in all those struggles as much as we can. So from that perspective, which we do feel pretty confident to write about.
Yeah.
What's it like to be a dude? So as much as we can anyway. Do I get sensitivity? Do I need to find a cis dude to get sensitivity reader? I don't think so.
I feel like
pretty confident.
I'm not even gonna go there. So we're gonna call it good for today, but catch us next Friday at 3 p.m. No, 2 p.m. Eastern.
11 a.m. Pacific.
Right. For another topic, which we haven't decided on what that is yet, but as we're moving through,
it's like Calastia, and I haven't read that book yet.
Calastia? Yeah, I feel like we need to sit down and really delve into Calastia and the crap that flows out of that country, because there are so many sides to it too. Because we'll talk about it when we get there.
We'll talk about So maybe Calastia next week. Maybe I've skimmed the book. I just haven't read it from cover to cover. So I got a week. I can do it.
And maybe we'll do something else. But
maybe we'll do something else. Yeah.
Sarah, tell us all about yourself.
I'm Sarah Stewart. I wrote Vigilant, book 1 of Through Shadows and Dreams. We wrote some words in the sequel this week, so I'm going to pretend I'm going to say I'm actively writing the sequel. Stalker. I slipped on this title there again. Continuing story via Cade Lenar and all the horrible things that happened to him. Also recently put out a new module for Scardlands. I wrote Maritime Vigil, Training Missions, Maritime Patrol, and now we have a new sequel, the sort of sequel to that's come out called Mist of Algos that I actually co-wrote with Travis Legg, the land lead. So the first one I mostly wrote with myself. Fran helped a ton, so I got to co-credit her on Maritime Vigil. We did write that together. But Mist, Fran did a little bit of editing, but for the most part it was just me and Travis. And it can be standalone, but it can also be a sequel to Maritime, depending on how you run it. And it's hard as hell. So that Maritime was like a 3-ish hour game. This is like an 8-ish hour game.
Gotcha.
And it's pretty brutal dungeon crawl. And I'm not sorry. So it's not huge. It's just combat in 5th edition takes a long time.
It's true. It's true.
So it's a longer game. And also Creators of Scardlands calendar you can find also on Drive-Thru RPG.
Nice. I will
And
post all
and
the
working on a
links.
Slytherin book too. I was hoping to get that out this week, but
I was
we're
going to say
waiting on
soon.
some.
I better see it soon.
Yeah, we're gonna get some art asset confirmation.
Yeah.
But we might put it out pre-art. I don't know yet. And also the formatting is really hard to do. It's taking time.
Well, I will post all the links to all of your awesome stuff in the show notes. And when those other things come out, we can talk about those. So yay. And I guess I should introduce myself as well. I am
You
Jeremy
are.
Hochhalter. I can be found on Twitter at WHPubs or Facebook at WH Publications. That is short for Wanderers Haven Publications, my one-man solo act of a publication company. I do stuff on Drive Through RPG and DM's Guild. I have so many projects that are just like sitting here waiting for me to finish them that sooner or later I will have something new. I haven't published anything in like a year, which feels so weird for me. So soon. You can catch us here on Fridays, WH Publications on Twitch, and we will see you next time. Bye.